following podcast is an exclusive presentation of Project Entertainment Network.
Thank you for coming to the Project Entertainment Network store. Please place your order. A good choice. A t-shirt for the horror show with Brian Keene. Amanda Method coffee mug. There's more. A Necrocastic on hoodie. That's sharp. But why on earth would you want Bizong leggings? Wait. Are you Mr. Frank? The Project Entertainment Network store, stacked with goodies from all your favorite podcasts. T-shirts, hoodies, mugs and more. www.projectentertainmentnetwork.com.
There shall come a podcast. A podcast like no other. Defenders Dialogue with Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Marvel Comics' original superhero non-team convenes once again. The Incredible Hulk, the Savage Submariner, the Master of the Mystic Arts, Doctor Strange, and a dynamic supporting cast of Marvel superheroes battle against evil as the Defenders. Without further ado, true believers, here's your hosts, Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Excelsior!
And welcome back once again, true believers, to Defenders Dialogue. I'm Brian Keene.
And I am Christopher Golden. And Brian, we had some technical difficulties getting going this morning, but I am very happy that we are here, and yet also at the same time extremely sad. It's a sad, one of the saddest days in the history of Marvel Comics.
Of course, we are, talking about the death of Stan Lee. We're recording this on Tuesday. He passed yesterday, and one of the very first things I thought was how bittersweet your regular Excelsior that you give us at the start of every show was going to be today.
Yeah, we need to talk in general about Stan, and God, there's so much to talk about here and unpack, really. I hate that word, but it makes sense in the context of this. I've seen so much, a massive outpouring of love and discussion of the inspiration, the influence of Stan online. But of course, you also see the people reminding you that Stan Lee is not the creator of Marvel Comics, that Stan Lee... there's a lot of controversy over what portion of certain characters he created versus Jack Kirby or Steve Ditko. The thing is, Brian, I think we need to push all of that aside and recognize that no matter what percentage of any given one of the massive library of characters that Stan had a hand in creating, he actually created. I don't think modern comics would exist in their current form, and maybe not even at all, without Stan.
I agree 100%. I mean, yes, the architects of what we know today as the Marvel Universe, they were many. Primarily, as you said, Steve Ditko, Jack Kirby, and Stan Lee. But Stan was the front man. If you imagine them as a rock band, if you imagine them as Van Halen, he was David Lee Roth. I mean,
right.
Van Halen may have been named after Eddie and Alex, who were in the band, but it was David Lee Roth who got all the publicity, who got out there in front of the cameras. And very much the same with Stan Lee. He was a showman.
Right.
Kirby was content to sit and draw, and Ditko, he's a well-known very reclusive artist. But yeah, not only would comics in their current form exist, but the field itself, I think it would have died off without Stan Lee pushing it. You think back to the pop art experiment of early Marvel and stuff like that. I mean, that was all Stan.
Well, and when we were growing up, dude, Stan Lee's voice and face were constant in pop culture for little kids. Whether it be in the, hey, true believers, it's Stan Lee here, on various cartoons that were on, cartoons that we watched everywhere, or in live and in person, like on TV, hosting when they showed the Amazing Spider-Man TV series with Nicholas Hammond, or the Reb Brown. Wait, no, was it Reb? Yeah, it was Reb Brown Captain America movies. I'm pretty sure that you'd see Stan like sitting in a chair somewhere explaining to all the true believers out there what the story of Spider-Man or Captain America might be.
Absolutely. And, he was able to bridge the generation gap. I know I talk with Mary's father about comic books a lot. He's in his 70s, and, he remembers reading some of those early Golden Age books. And after a certain time, you put down the funny books and became an adult. Not so with the Marvel Comics era we grew up on, Silver Age, Bronze Age. I very distinctly remember being about 8 or 9 years old, reading those Steve Gerber era Defenders that we've talked about on previous shows. And there was this much older kid, Steve Shear, who listens to the show. Hello, Steve. He was a teenager. He was graduating high school, and he was reading Marvel as well. And we would discuss Stan's soapbox together. So it was the first generation that didn't put the funny books down when they became a certain age. And a lot of that was down to Stan Lee's sensibilities and communicating to them and making comics an actual art form. I don't mean from an artist's perspective. I just mean as far as branding, as far as getting out there in the psyche.
Branding comics as an art form.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Going to college campuses, speaking to college students, and both in person and in print, just addressing the Vietnam War, addressing whatever it might have been, addressing racism. So many people have been reposting Stan's soapbox installments in the last 24 hours. And that's a big part of it too. You respected Stan Lee as much as he put himself out there sometimes in a way that seemed a little bit cartoony, clownish in that sense. And I actually hate that version of cartoony, that definition of it, but you know what I'm saying?
I do.
But Stan, you went into it and you thought, this is a guy who has something to say. And getting back to Kirby and Ditko and all of the other co-creators that worked with Stan, every single one of those people deserves to have the recognition for their contributions, but so does Stan. And so I think, honestly, Stephen King did it for me, and Charles L. Grant's anthologies did it for me, and so many other books inspired me. But I'm not sure that I would have gotten there if not for the Marvel comics of this era that we talk about so lovingly. And those only exist, and so many of those characters only exist because Stan existed. And
Absolutely.
So 95 years, amazing run. I certainly think, I'm not grieving the fact that he's passed. I'm just honoring the fact that he was here at all. And as I said to my wife Connie last night and my daughter Lily, that this is a guy who literally has impacted from an entertainment perspective, and in some ways from a moral philosophical perspective with a lot of the things that he preached in the context of his comics. Almost every person on Earth.
Oh, absolutely.
Like Walt Disney.
I can remember in the 80s, when I was in the Navy, we were in Kenya. And, now Kenya these days is very different, but back then it was a very poor country. AIDS was decimating the population back then, and we didn't really have a grasp on what AIDS was at the time. But I remember this is a poor country, people literally living in huts, dirt huts. And I remember seeing this kid with a shirt on, and it had the Captain America shield. And the only English the kid knew was Captain America. And he kept calling me Captain America. Hey, Captain America. it's a universal mythology,
Right.
that Lee and Kirby and Ditko and all these others created, and Lee spearheaded it. And I mean, you think about Greek mythology, Roman mythology. Those have lasting power now. A millennia later. But I dare say the Marvel universe of characters will just as well.
I agree. I mean, and you're right. I mean, that's actually the phrase new mythology was in my one post about Stan yesterday, because I think that, the Marvel mythology and the DC mythology are, and again, I know some people will look askance at claims like this, but this is true. I mean, even before the MCU, everyone in the world knew who Spider-Man was. He was in every form of entertainment, every form of merchandise, outside of comics. And,
Absolutely.
so you can go back. And again, I want to just reiterate, we're not taking anything away from his co-creators. But you can't have, you don't have the Fantastic Four without both Lee and Kirby.
Exactly.
And although Stan did not create Captain America, he came into to Captain America at a vital time, and so he certainly contributed to that.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. That character, it was a Golden Age character, but how many Golden Age characters, no one remembers anymore.
Right.
He took that Golden Age character and completely revitalized him, revamped him, rebooted him. These days we rage about reboots and remakes, but he did that in the 60s with Captain America,
right,
and with Khazar and some of the other Golden Age characters.
I still love that you call him Khazar. It's funny because it's like that thing where I remember sitting at, I don't know if I've ever told this story on the show, but I remember sitting at a lunch table once upon a time with Glenn Greenberg and Evan Skolnick, who at the time were both editors at Marvel. Hello to both of them if they listen to this show ever. But Glenn and Evan snapped at Glenn because he referred to Magneto as Magneto. And it's that thing where, like, we grew up reading these comics, and however it was pronounced in our heads, I mean, Magneto or Magneto, which we all say Magneto now, but that was something that you decided in your head how it was pronounced, and you argued with your friends about how it was pronounced. So it just always makes me smile when I think
Absolutely.
about that.
I mean, look at you and I, early episodes of the show. Is it Clea? Is it Clay?
Yeah, exactly. I don't, because it is how it is in your head.
Yep.
But again, now, did you ever have a chance to meet Stan?
I did not. He's one of the few people in this business I've never met. Didn't I? But I've heard the anecdotes of many who have, and many who were lucky enough to work with him. But
yeah, I did not get a chance to work with him, but I did meet him a couple of times in passing at conventions, and he was just such a larger than life figure, and I can't repeat on the show the funny jokes that Tom Sinagoski made up about Stan as we saw him walking through hotels at conventions and things. But I did, and I have to dig it up, man. I did interview once upon a time in the early 90s to mid 90s. I did a ton of journalism in the comics field, and for Hero Illustrated did a special issue on villains. And I actually had the opportunity to interview Stan and Jack Kirby. And in fact, my Kirby interview for that issue was the last Jack Kirby interview.
Wow.
It was the last ever interview with Jack. It was the week before he died. But yeah, I mean, I should say, to my knowledge, I've never seen anything that came later than that one.
Tell me you still have copies of both those interviews.
Yeah, I do. I have, you mean printed copies? They were not. Yeah.
Well, I mean, copies that you can reproduce, put up on your website or something.
Yeah. I have I have the magazines. So yeah, I have those interviews. So yeah, so that was it. I interviewed Stan and Jack, and it was interesting stuff. But yeah, so man, I got to tell you, I just feel I don't think it's overestimating to say again that I don't think either one of us would be doing what we're doing for a living if Stan Lee had never existed.
Oh, I agree. I absolutely agree. And I like to imagine that, no matter what you believe happens after we die, no matter what your religious belief or your scientific belief, I like to imagine the pearly gates, and he's walking up to him right now with the sunglasses, and Saint whoever is in charge and looking down, and he's saying, "Hey, true believer, this is Stan Lee." And he's just strolling right in there, and maybe Kirby is standing there with a cigar to greet him,
and give him a sock in the mouth, probably.
Yep.
But
yeah,
he was a tough kid, Jack Kirby. Yeah, that was. Yeah, I'm with you though. I mean, I'm so grateful to the escape. For the escape that Stan created and the inspiration, Brian. Let's go back to that one last second before we move on to discussing the Defenders. The thing that I hate to bring this back to politics, so I don't want to talk about our current political environment. But I think Stan's soapbox made it impossible to discuss Stan's impact without also talking about his impact on our moral culture.
Absolutely.
And I think that the with great power comes great responsibility credo from Spider-Man, and the actions and behavior of all of the heroes that he created, co-created, or shepherded into existence, it just makes me incredulous about the number of people who also grew up with these inspirations and examples, who can have grown up on this stuff and not understand what they were about.
Right.
So I'm grateful to Stan for that as well, for the inspiration, because in fact I should post later on. I should repost an essay. Lisa Abrams, our friend Lisa Abrams Mignona, edited a book that came out last year called "Last Night, a Superhero Saved My Life." And I wrote an essay for that about how, in the absence of my father, who, and again, we're getting into serious topics here, but my parents were divorced when I was very young. My father wasn't really around very much. And he was a poor example of how to conduct oneself.
Right.
In the absence of that example, I learned the difference between right and wrong from Marvel Comics.
Right.
And I wrote this whole essay about it. I should repost that later, because really, for me, it isn't just about the entertainment. It's about the example and the inspiration. So,
well, no, I agree 100%. I mean, my parents were there, they were together, but they weren't there. I've talked on the horror show. My dad, fresh out of Vietnam, had just a terrible case of PTSD. Except back then we didn't know what PTSD was. So I spent a lot of time alone out in the woods, anywhere I could go away from the house.
Right.
And, for me growing up in rural Pennsylvania, that was the woods. I spent a lot of time out in the woods, and my world was the Marvel Universe, with occasional forays into DC, for Commandy and Batman. But mostly I was a Marvel kid. And a lot of what I learned about how to deal with people, how to interact with people, about being a man. And I hate to I don't want people to think that's a sexist term, but that is how we were raised in the 70s and 80s.
Sure.
You gotta be a man. And the way
let's say about what kind of man you wanted to be.
Yeah. The way I learned that, I love my father, but it wasn't from him. It wasn't from any of the other male role models in my life. It was from these fictional characters. So thanks to Stan for bringing those to me and for paving the way for the writers who did influence me, like Gerber and Roy Thomas, Len Wein, Mark DeMatteis, who we're reading right now.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on that note to discuss the Defenders. And now go ahead, Brian, and yell at me about Avengers Annual number 10 or 11 or whichever one it was.
Yeah. Now, before we get into, our Defenders, if the last few episodes here, they're splintered. We have Namor and Son of Satan disappeared, and Doc Strange went to find them, and Nighthawk seems to have survived the explosion that culminated at the end of the Secret Empire storyline. But there's another Nighthawk, another Kyle Richmond, who's apparently president of the United States, and it's all very odd. And we've had these solo stories with Hellcat and others. We're about to reunite our Defenders, but before that happens, there is Avengers Annual number 11. Now, Chris could not find it down in his basement. He didn't have time to read it. But because it influences what we're about to talk about, I'm going to give you folks a quick recap. It features one of the Defenders' greatest foes, one of the main characters in their rogues gallery. That is Nebulon, the Celestial Man.
Oh, Jesus, that guy again?
That guy, yeah. Except here's the thing. When we last saw Nebulon, the rest of his people had showed up, and they had taken him back to his home planet where he was going to stand trial. All right, well, turns out Nebulon was given a choice. He could kill himself by his own hand, which is the honorable way, or he could choose exile. He chose exile, which in centuries of their people, no one has ever done. So we find out in Avengers Annual 11 that Nebulon is a family man. He's married with a wife and children. And because he chose exile, he has brought great shame on the family. So,
well, let's remember also that Nebulon is a giant bug creature. Let's not, you said he's a family man with a wife and children, but he only looks like this golden gleaming god. He's a bug creature.
Right. So he comes back to Earth, and Nebulon has changed his ways. He desires friendship, but he realizes he can't be friends with the Defenders. They're just going to beat his ass as soon as they see him. So he befriends the Avengers. And then his wife shows up on Earth, and she convinces the Defenders that Nebulon's up to no good. And what we have is a replay here of the Avengers-Defenders War. This is the Avengers-Defenders War 2.0. It turns out both Nebulon's wife and Nebulon himself were being subversive. Nebulon, in fact, had built a machine that was siphoning off the power of the Avengers, but he was using it only to make himself strong enough to defend himself should the Defenders attack. Anyway, long story short, the Defenders defeat both Nebulon and his wife, both of whom are they basically end up killing each other. And that is it for Nebulon as far as Defenders dialogue goes. He doesn't appear again. I really wish, Chris, that you had dug out that issue, because I think Nebulon needs a bigger send-off.
It doesn't. I don't think that Nebulon needs a bigger send-off. I think that, the Defenders Rogues Gallery includes some characters who went before their time and other characters who overstayed their welcome. And, Nebulon, there were some fun stories with Nebulon, but I'm way more interested in the big twist that happens that I'm not going to mention right now in the arc that we're about to begin.
Well, we're gonna get to that. One thing they do comment on in the Avengers Annual that's important. If you go back a few episodes back now, you'll remember that Valkyrie is no longer in the body of Barbara Norris. She is, in fact, the Norse goddess Valkyrie. And in Avengers Annual, they all comment that Valkyrie is talking differently. She no longer talks like a human being. She talks like Thor. And you'll see that as we head now into the Defenders. The other thing at the end of that Avengers Annual, Beast, remember, used to be an Avenger. Now he's a Defender. He invites a couple of old friends to a party, namely the Vision and the Scarlet Witch. Also in that Avengers Annual, Silver Surfer, of course, longtime Defender, founding member, helps in that fight against Nebulon. So when we open with Defenders, what issue?
112.
112. We open with that party, and that is why Silver Surfer and Vision and Scarlet Witch are hanging out there with Gargoyle and Beast and Valkyrie.
Right, and also
And
let's
Hellcat.
recall that on a recent episode we discussed the poll that had been taken in the pages of Defenders, in their letters page, Defenders Dialogue, about which characters people wanted to see in the Defenders, and the Vision and the Scarlet Witch both scored very high numbers in that poll.
They did.
Thus, this is one of those, for those who are unaware, Marvel Comics very often would have, because you demanded it, in big letters on the front pages of comics. And this is an example of because you demanded it. So these characters are here. Now, I want to make one sort of general statement about this arc before we go into it. Well, first of all, I'm really glad to be back in the regular run of Defenders here and moving forward. We only have, as of this issue, if I'm not mistaken, 40 issues more of the regular run of the Defenders to go through. So it's interesting. This arc, all due respect to Mark DeMatteis, I feel like in two ways. First of all, there is so many freaking characters and heroes. It seems like an impossible task for him to do justice to all of them. And while he can't do that, he certainly does justice to many of them with individual stories that take place in here. It's a little overwritten, which is not uncommon in the era. But that said, wow, as far as twists, these days the things that happen in the next 3 issues would have been spoiled online long before they appeared in the comics. But
Right.
you were reading these comics at the time. There are reveals in here that you're just like, holy crap, what the hell just happened? And
I remember reading these as a teenager. We've talked before when Nighthawk dies in that explosion, and when Valkyrie gets shot in the head, following that explosion, those are huge moments for me.
right.
But the twists and turns over these next 3 issues put all that to shame.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's great stuff. I mean, so anyway, so we'll launch in. Issue 112, Strange Visitor from Another Planet, is written by J.M. DeMatteis, penciled by Don Perlin, inked by, I think it was Mike Gustovich. If I'm wrong about the first name, I apologize. And we begin, as you said, Brian, at this party with Beast literally dangling from the chandelier. And we have Vera, his girlfriend, Dolly, Hellcat's housekeeper and surrogate mom, Silver Surfer, Valkyrie, Gargoyle, and the Vision and the Scarlet Witch. So the party is in full swing.
Right, and they very helpfully recap everything I just told you about Avengers Annual number 11. They comment on how Valkyrie is different now.
Right.
We get, if regular readers weren't familiar with the Vision and Scarlet Witch, we get a quick display of what they can do.
By the Beast spilling coffee on the Vision.
Yeah, and then Gargoyle, he offers a toast to the Beast, who's now joined the Defenders, and Kyle Richmond, a.k.a. Nighthawk, who, remember, they all think is dead. We know that apparently he's not, which leads Valkyrie to ask, by the way, hey, where's Doctor Strange?
Right, and suddenly all of them have forgotten that Doctor Strange had gone off looking for Damon Hellstrom, the Hulk, and Namor, the Submariner.
Son of Satan, Hulk.
Gargoyle says he's going to call Doctor Strange, or that he has just called Doctor Strange, my mistake. And Wong sounds upset because Doctor Strange hasn't returned. So the Silver Surfer says he's got to go off and search because, of course, that's what Doctor Strange would have done for them. So So basically, Vera smartly, as the the person who does not usually traffic in these kinds of problems, says he said he was going to another dimension. Wouldn't that make him hard to find?
But as it turns out, they don't have to look far because Doctor Strange astrally projects to them. Turns out he's in another dimension, and the strain of astrally projecting across the dimensions is too great. He says, but the world needs you. And Silver Surfer says, across the dimensions, then does the threat to Earth originate on some other plane? And Doctor Strange says, you misunderstand, Norrinrod. I mentioned a great danger to the world, but I did not say what world. And then he teleports them to an alternate Earth.
Exactly, an alternate Earth where they, of course, leaving Vera and Dolly behind for their own safety. He teleports them to an alternate Earth where Bruce Banner is there in place of the Hulk. They're reunited, but then those characters who've just been transported from the I was going to say our Earth because I always feel like it was our Earth, but their Earth are presented with what appears to be Kyle Richmond, aka Nighthawk, whom they all think is alive. Oh, excuse me, they all think is dead. Now he's alive, and he explains to them that he was somehow transported away in the moment when he appeared to die.
That's right. So when the mountain blew up, when Mindy and the other telepaths, and the bomb that August Masters had set, when all that went down, right as the mountain blew up, Kyle Richmond was sucked off our Earth and deposited on this Earth.
There you go. And then more revelations, Brian. The whole group, the new arrivals, are shown into where they see Namor and the son of Satan, and they reveal that Hyperion is there.
That's right.
They believe that this is the Hyperion of the Squadron Sinister, but in fact, it's explained to them that this is actually the Earth where the Squadron Supreme is the one big superhero group on this Earth. It's analogous in many ways to the Justice League, and that the president in this world is Nelson Rockefeller, had been taken over by the Serpent Crown, and anyway, madness ensues. But the idea here is that Hyperion is unwell, but he's the only member of the Squadron Supreme who is not under the mental control of what at the time we believe to be, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, of what we believe to be, the Overmind, also potentially President Kyle Richmond, but yes, the Overmind. Now, Brian, there are two little interludes here. Do you want to describe them?
Yes, absolutely. While Hyperion is preparing to explain the backstory to you, reader, we turn our attention thousands of miles above this alternate reality Earth, where a strange energy cloud drifts, and then it takes the form of a face, and that face is Mindy, Kyle Richmond's mentally unstable ex-girlfriend, who we thought died in the same explosion that killed Kyle. We then go to an alley on this alternate Earth's Washington, D.C., where a man is running away from a bunch of pursuers. They're shooting at him. He strikes back, shoots them dead, and this man is revealed to be August Masters. So not only has Kyle Richmond survived, Mindy has apparently survived, and August Masters, who you'll remember was leading the Secret Empire, his plan was to use the telepaths to destroy Russia and defeat communism. Apparently, they're all alive here on this alternate reality Earth.
Now, do you object to me explaining the Mindy and August Masters situation? Because I think it makes it easier to not have those threads also dangling.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, in a nutshell, all you need to know at this point is that Mindy is there as a being of pure sort of psychic energy She is the sum total of the various psychics that were employed by the Secret Empire, who were joined psychically at the time of the explosion. And so this character is now the merger of those psychics, with Mindy at the forefront, but in one being. Right. August Masters is the August Masters from the regular Marvel universe, and that's all I'm going to say at this point. But Brian, I just think there's so many dangling threads in this, or plot threads to follow through this thing, that it was important to clean those up now.
There are.
All right, so then the Overmind.
You want me to sum it up?
Go ahead.
All right, so in this alternate reality, we have an alien race known as the Eternals, okay? But unlike the Eternals from the Marvel 616 universe, these Eternals were bent on universal domination. And to do that, they merged into this cosmic being known as the Overmind. Now, Chris mentioned earlier that on this alternate reality Earth, Nelson Rockefeller was president. He was very evil, and the Squadron Supreme stopped him. After they did, this Earth's Kyle Richmond, who is also a Nighthawk, okay, but he's the Nighthawk of this Earth, he became president of the United States. So all those little flashbacks in the past few episodes, that's this Earth's Kyle Richmond. The Nighthawk that has appeared to Doctor Strange, Hulk, Submariner, etc., is our Nighthawk from our Earth. Basically, in a nutshell, Overmind exerts an evil influence over President Kyle Richmond, who declares martial law and basically becomes the Antichrist. He declares martial law. He locks up, thousands of people under the name of national security. It would be sort of like if Trump came out tomorrow and said, I'm going to lock up everybody connected to Antifa, and how he did that was he just locked up everybody that was registered as a Democrat. It's a very sort of overreaching thing here. The Squadron Supreme try to stop him, but the Overmind beats each and every one of them. Only Hyperion is left alive. Well, not alive, but Overmind takes over each and every one of them. Only Hyperion escapes.
The control of the Overmind.
Yeah, he does it barely. And then, as you said, he's an analogy of Superman. His weakness is Argonite.
As opposed to Krypton, because he's from the planet Argon.
Right. Kyle Richmond poisons him with Argonite, and he is slowly dying, and he sends for help, and that is how Doctor Strange and Nighthawk and Son of Satan and Submariner and Hulk ended up here.
Right. So when we get a many pages sort of flashback that shows us all of what Brian just described, including the Squadron Supreme fighting the Overmind and being defeated, etc., etc. And what happens with, so it gets, and it is this is essentially the Justice League. Power Princess is Wonder Woman. Nuke
is Firestorm. Dr. Spectrum is Green Lantern.
Right. Then they get President Richmond, with the Overmind controlling him, frames Hyperion as a foreign spy, an alien double agent. So it just got worse and worse, with the Overmind using the Squadron Supreme to basically take over the Earth.
Right. But it's not just the Earth that he wants to take over, as we find out on that final cliffhanger splash page. The Overmind and President Kyle Richmond have built a moon base with an armada of spaceships capable of faster-than-light travel.
As you do.
Yeah, they're going to crush the universe.
There you go. I want to point out, I'm not sure, two quick things before we move on to the next issue. The assistant editor on this book at this point, and I'm not sure if we noticed or took note of it before, is Ann Nocenti.
Right.
Ann Nocenti would go on to edit many Marvel titles and become an established writer in her own right. So I want to point that out. And also want to point out, and I'm not 100% sure about this, I want to look into it, but Novelist Greg Cox appears to be one of the letter writers in this issue. I like to point those things out when we run across them. And I want to, when we get to 114, Brian, in our next episode, I definitely want to talk about the letters page in that one. But we'll get there. For the moment,
I think we're going to only have time to cover 113 today.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. So 113. The cover says "Too many heroes," Brian, and I would say that's an accurate depiction.
But now, do you get the reference there? Because it's actually self-referential to a previous Defender saga that we've covered already.
Was it the Defender for a Day thing you're talking about?
Yeah, that cover also said "Too many heroes."
Yeah,
on the cover.
Yeah, and it's
I like that it's self-referential.
Yeah, well, so. Basically, most of the characters who are in this are on the cover, but not all of them because there were so many they could not fit them all. This is DeMatteis and Perlin, and interesting to note, they're listed as co-plotters here, with Gustovich on finishes or breakdowns.
That's right.
Or finishes there. So interestingly enough, that Perlin is a co-plotter for this.
And the great Al Milgram is editor, who I got a chance to work with on Doom Patrol. He lettered an issue of Doom Patrol that I got to write. It was a treat to be able to work with him. I talked Defenders with him a little bit.
Very cool. Well, it's interesting because the first issue of this storyline had so much to accomplish and set up, but now that we're rolling, it starts to get really interesting.
Yeah. We open on the moon base, where Overmind and President Kyle Richmond, remember, alternate reality Kyle Richmond, and the Squadron Supreme are getting ready to go forth and conquer the universe, as you do.
Yeah, and Overmind, again, as you do, Overmind, again, is comprised of 1 billion minds from his race of Eternals. They combined their intellect and the power of their minds to go out and try to take over the world.
Right.
Then we get more of August Masters. We get a flashback. Go ahead.
While the Defenders are still standing around trying to figure out what to do, August Masters is a man of action. He is our new Jack Norris.
He's like evil Jack Norris.
He's like evil Jack Norris. He is... We get a flashback where, as we said, when the mountain is blowing up, he finds himself, materializing on this alternate reality Earth. Here, his dream of United States supremacy had come to pass. Communism has been defeated. America held Earth's destiny in its hands. But instead of offering hope and freedom, this United States offered only despair and repression.
Right. So this is the nightmare version of August Masters' dream.
Right. So he has gone ahead and snuck aboard the moon base.
Yeah, to try to assassinate President Kyle Richmond.
Yeah, his plans to kill Kyle Richmond.
Right. Then we cut away to our group of heroes gathered in their underground base. And interestingly, once again, we whip out the son of Satan's, infrequently used ability to heal people. So he's healing Hyperion from what ails him. And then the Vision is trying to calm Hyperion down. They've got to develop a course of action. The Beast says, no, we've got to stop this armada that's going off into the universe. So there's a lot of argument about what to do, but first they need to actually get there.
Right, and the problem is Doctor Strange is still weak from helping Son of Satan heal Hyperion, so he can't teleport him.
Right.
The teleporting machine is busted. They need Banner to fix it. So the only two Defenders capable of traveling into space are Silver Surfer and the Vision.
There you go. And then we get again, like, even now, I freaking love this page, or this half page, with the Silver Surfer flying into space with the Vision standing casually on the back of the board with his... I so want to see that in a movie. It's a great couple of panels. And here's another great... one of the things I like about this issue and the next issue is you have all these tiny little great character moments. And in this one, to sum up, folks, the Silver Surfer is trapped on Earth. Galactus has basically bound him to the Earth. There's a shield around the planet that the Silver Surfer cannot escape.
But this is an alternate reality Earth.
Exactly. So the Silver Surfer can leave and fly in space once more. He's free to roam the spaceways, and he glories in that for a moment as he gets out of Earth's atmosphere for the first time. And it takes the Vision to remind him, hey, this is great for you, pal, but we have a job to do.
Right.
So before you get carried away, let's go complete our task.
And that's your favorite character moment, and it's followed by my favorite character moment. Because I've always said my favorite part of the Defenders is the interplay between Hulk and Namor. We got Banner trying to fix the teleporting machine. He gets frustrated. He gets angry. Of course, he turns into the Hulk, and we get that Namor that I love. He throws his hands up in exasperation. He says, by the 7 seas of all the times for Banner's rage to trigger the change into the Hulk, I swear, Strange, this brute has been nothing but trouble since the day we first joined forces with him. And Hulk says, if Fishman doesn't like Hulk, maybe he would like Hulk to throw him back into the ocean.
Yeah. And then their childish bickering is interrupted by the cosmic creature that has been formed by Mindy and the other psychics that we talked about. And we learn from Mindy's words that she is the one, or they, because she is at the forefront of this being, but there is a combined minds of these various psychics in there. But that she is the one who plucked Kyle Richmond from that explosion. And Kyle is like, wow, I can't believe it's Mindy. But, and he has a lot of thoughts about that. She saved him, but how much of the woman I loved is in this being?
That's right.
Is what he's thinking at this point.
That's right. Meanwhile, our new buddy comedy, Silver Surfer and the Vision, they've snuck into the moon base, or so they think. It turns out that Overmind and Kyle Richmond were alerted to their presence, and they are confronted by the Squadron Supreme. And it looks like they're going to get their asses handed to them. But then the rest of the Defenders show up because Mindy and the Psychics, which should be a really good name for a band, have added their psychic energies to that of the damaged teleporter and has enabled everyone to travel to the moon.
Well, not only that, but then that effort has meant that they can't keep their sort of semi-human form intact at the moment, and so they fade away for now, which is handy because that's a creature way too powerful to throw into the mix of this. President Richmond, being controlled by the Overmind up in a control room, orders the Squadron Supreme to attack the Defenders, and the fight ensues.
That's right.
I don't want to, we could go through a bunch of the stuff in this fight if we feel like it, Brian, but we do have Tom Thumb versus the Hulk, which is amusing.
Yeah, Tom Thumb would basically be this, remember, they're an analogy for the Justice League, so he would be the Atom.
And then there's Valkyrie versus Power Princess, who's the Wonder Woman of this group. Gargoyle versus the guy who's essentially Green Arrow.
Right.
And it goes on. The Nighthawk versus the guy who's basically Hawkman. And again, I know people love these characters, but it goes on and on. There's Lady Lark is basically the Black Canary character. She takes down a number of them before Doctor Strange steps in. Arcana, who's, essentially Zatanna, takes on the Scarlet Witch. And it goes on and on and on. One of my favorites is that the guy who's known as Amphibian, who's Aquaman, jumps on jumps on Namor thinking he's going to drown him, Brian. Pushes in the water. Now, I want to point this out. It's in the Namor says, "Your arrogance is as laughable as your ignorance, my friend. You may fancy yourself a master of the oceans, but in truth, you are a soulless, pale copy of the true Submariner." Now, many of our readers probably don't know this, Brian. many of our listeners, I should say, probably don't know this. Most of the Marvel characters were created in the aftermath of the success of DC Comics.
That's right.
Where the Justice League begat the Fantastic Four or what have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But Aquaman came after the Submariner. And of course, comics fans know that. The real comics fans know that. But there may be people who read comics who don't know this. And so there's no question in my mind that this commentary is directed at people who read comics in this era and thought that the Submariner was a ripoff of Aquaman, when in fact the opposite was true.
Absolutely. So while this battle is raging, we go up to the control room, and President Kyle Richmond, he looks different, and he says something very odd. He says, we seem to have a minor problem. The hour of transformation has not yet come, and the defenders have already defeated the entire Squadron Supreme. The hour of transformation, what is that about, Chris?
Well, Brian, we're not going to say yet. It's a secret. But weirdly, he says, Overmind, get out there. And the commentary is, although he is supposed to be the master here, the Overmind blindly obeys his pawn's command, Brian.
So could Hyperion have been wrong? Is Overmind not controlling President Kyle Richmond?
And Overmind seems to be able only to say the same phrases over and over again.
That's right.
So Hulk and Hyperion try to attack the Overmind, and they're defeated. They're knocked down.
While they're doing that, August Masters creeps up towards the control room
and shoots President Kyle Richmond through the head.
But he has a great line here. He may be evil Jack Norris, but it's a great line. He says, President Richmond, and evil Kyle Richmond turns around and says, who are you? And he says, the spirit of freedom.
So President Kyle Richmond is shot through the head, and Nighthawk, our Kyle Richmond, comes in and sees himself dead.
Right.
And then something strange happens, Brian. Overmind sinks to his knees and begins babbling like an infant, just acting like a baby, saying the same phrases over and over again. And up in the control room, a strange black mist emerges from inside Kyle Richmond, President Kyle Richmond.
That's right. Now, my girlfriend, author Mary San Giovanni, hosts a podcast every week about cosmic horror called Cosmic Shenanigans. And she's not listening to us right now, but she should, because this has been an alternate reality science fiction epic. And in the space of a panel, Jam DeMatteis and Don Perlin switch genres to cosmic horror. And oh, what cosmic horror it is.
It is such a great switcheroo. And again, the kind of thing I never saw that, even though I read it decades ago, I still didn't see it coming again. I did not remember.
Oh, here she comes, Chris. She just came out of her office. She heard the word cosmic horror. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
President Kyle Richmond is down and dead, as far as we know, and this ooze comes out of him, and it has tentacles, Brian, as the best cosmic horrors do, and you hear it say, right. Free, my evolution at last is complete, the hour of transformation is at hand, the hour of, and in the splash page that finishes the issue, we see, and he announces himself, Null, the living darkness, whom we've seen before, and who is a giant mass of black tentacles and giant red eyeballs.
That's right. This is Null's, third appearance in Defenders?
I think so. I think so.
You know, we lost Nebulon at the beginning of the show, but now Null is solidified in the Defenders Rogues Gallery.
And all we can say here is, without spoiling the next issue, which we don't want to because it's great, all we can say here is that clearly everything we have been told by the writer, J.M. DeMatteis, is a lie.
Absolutely.
And what's really going on in this story is something completely different from what we've said. And I will also say, Brian, it's fascinating to me, again, how these threads created by DeMatteis in his run, particularly as related to the Secret Empire and Overmind, carry on through the end long after DeMatteis' departure.
I agreed. So next week, folks, we're gonna continue DeMatteis' H.P. Lovecraft-esque saga, and then what does DeMatteis do for a follow-up? Dr. Seuss.
Yeah, and I don't even want to talk about that one yet. Yes, but we will go from Cosmic Horror to Dr. Seuss next week. That's on right. Defenders Dialogue. And Brian, in memory of Stan, what do we say to the true believers out there?
We say Excelsior, true believers.
Excelsior. Rest in peace, Stan.
You're listening to American Top 40. More tragedy in the news today. Kim Kardashian has a new baby. What the hell? There's nothing good to listen to. Hey, wait, what's this?
You gotta roll that out.
See, it makes me do weird things. I don't like it.
God damn it.
I'd be going down on myself?
Shit.
Hey guys, it's Bill,
Mick,
Maya,
and Junior
from the Unsupervised Podcast.
check us out every Thursday on the Project Entertainment Network.
Take a break from the stress of the world and come have a laugh with or at us.
Bill.
My Favorite Story, a podcast author anthology featuring short fiction from the hosts of the Project Entertainment Network shows. Three guys with beards: Jim Moore, Jonathan Maybar, and Chris Golden.
Tom Clark from Necrocast Igborn.
Brian Keene of The Horror Show. Chuck Buda. And Armand Rosamilia of The Mando Method. Mary San Giovanni of Cosmic Shenanigans. Jay Wilburn from Matters of Faith. John Urbancic of Ink Stains.
Biz Ung's Mr. Frank.
Available on Kindle and in paperback and through the Project Entertainment Network store.
www.projectentertainmentnetwork.com.
This has been an exclusive presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.